As I tumbled down the steps and snapped my limb, my kin assumed I'd lost consciousness. I stayed motionless below, while my spouse murmured, "This could be it. He's broken now. We might claim he was wasted and hurry it along." My girl responded, "We'll be rid of him." I pressed my teeth down till I tasted iron. When help arrived, they faced something they didn't expect. It started with a simple misstep. Matthew, groggy and half awake, stepped onto the staircase where the carpet had been loose for weeks. His foot snagged, and before he could grab the railing, he went tumbling down. A sickening crack echoed as his arm twisted beneath him, followed by his head slamming into the wall. Blinded by pain and barely able to breathe, he couldn't move, just lay there, stunned. That's when he heard it. His wife, Rachel, leaned in and whispered coldly, "This might be our chance. He's useless now. We could say he fell drunk and moved things along." Then came his daughter Emily's chilling reply, "We'll finally be free." Lying on the cold floor, Matthew's mind drifted back through the last couple of years. Years that now felt like a slow-motion warning he never saw coming. Rachel, once affectionate and warm, had grown distant. Her hugs became rare, her phone always glued to her hand, screen tilted away any time he walked by. At first he told himself it was stress, maybe burnout. But deep down the red flags were impossible to ignore. Then there was Emily, his little girl who used to run into his arms after school, giggling and calling him her hero. Now, she barely looked up when he came home. Short replies, eye rolls, locked bedroom doors. He chalked it up to college stress and growing up, but the coldness cut deep. Still, Matthew pushed forward. 60-hour work weeks, weekend side jobs, late nights fixing things around the house. He wasn't perfect, but he tried, really tried, to be the rock they needed. He never imagined the people he loved most were the ones quietly sharpening the knives. Matthew lay motionless at the bottom of the stairs, his body screaming in pain, vision foggy, every breath a struggle. But he wasn't unconscious, not even close. And what he heard next made his blood run cold. Rachel crouched beside him, checking his pulse. Her voice dropped into a hushed, unfamiliar tone. "This might be our chance," she said softly. "He's useless now. We can say he was drunk. It'll make everything easier." Matthew's mind raced. Easier? What process? He wanted to open his eyes, to scream, but something told him to stay still, to listen. Then Emily stepped closer, knelt down beside him, and, without a hint of remorse, whispered, "We'll finally be free." Free from him. The man who worked himself into the ground to pay for her dance lessons, her college tuition, the house they lived in. The man who gave them everything. And now they were planning to erase him. He bit his tongue so hard it bled, forcing himself to stay quiet. To them he was unconscious, powerless. But Matthew heard every sickening word. Still lying broken on the floor, Matthew kept his eyes shut and his breathing shallow, doing everything he could to stay in character, out cold. But inside, he was wide awake, listening to every word. "Did you move the money like we talked about?" Emily asked, her voice eerily calm. "Most of it," Rachel replied. "There's still about 20 grand in the joint account. I'll move it next week when I set up the new one. He never checks the statements anyway." Matthew's stomach turned. "They were stealing from me?" Then came the final insult. Rachel sighed. "We should probably call an ambulance. It'll look suspicious if we don't." Emily hesitated. "Should we change his clothes, make it look like he'd been drinking?" "No time," Rachel said. "Just grab the whiskey from the cabinet." Matthew felt cold droplets hit his chest. They were pouring alcohol on him, staging the scene for the paramedics, turning him into the drunk villain of their little play. His heart pounded, not from the pain, but from the sheer horror of it all. They weren't just betraying him. They were erasing him. At the hospital, Matthew sat on the exam table, arm in a cast, head pounding, the stench of whiskey still clinging to his shirt. The doctor glanced up from the chart. "Smelled alcohol on your clothes. Do you remember drinking?" That was the moment. He could have shouted the truth, exposed it all, but instead he played it cool. "No," he said quietly. "Must have spilled when I fell." Rachel jumped in before the doctor could respond. "You were definitely drinking, honey. Don't you remember? You've been under so much stress lately." She offered the doctor a concerned look, her voice full of fake empathy. "He doesn't always remember when he drinks." The doctor looked skeptical, but didn't press it. And just like that, the lie was on the record. Back home later that night, Matthew lay in bed, pretending to sleep while Rachel showered. His mind raced. He grabbed his phone with his one good hand, logged into their bank account, and his heart sank. Over $40,000 gone, withdrawn in small amounts over time. dozens of quiet transactions, hidden in plain sight. He kept scrolling, trembling. How didn't I see this? The answer hit him hard. Because he trusted them, but not anymore. Matthew knew he had to play the long game, so he leaned into the role they cast him in. Fragile, foggy, broken. He shuffled around the house in sweatpants, wincing with every movement, pretending the pain meds made him loopy. Rachel and Emily bought it completely. "Take all the time you need," Rachel said sweetly, the guiltless villain in full costume. "Just focus on healing." But Matthew wasn't resting, he was working. The moment the house was empty, he got to work setting up his counterattack. He called the bank, opened new accounts, and started securing what was left of his finances. Then came the surveillance. A tiny voice recorder tucked under the couch, a discreet security camera aimed at Rachel's home office, another in the living room, hidden in plain sight. He told her it was for safety while he was on meds. She nodded, not suspecting a thing. He replayed their conversations when they weren't around, capturing every whisper, every lie. When they thought he was dozing on the couch, they'd speak freely about money, about timelines, about how relieved they'd be once he was out of the picture. They thought he was broken. They thought he was defeated. But Matthew was building his case, one whisper at a time. Late one evening, the house quiet, Matthew sat on the couch, his cast resting on a pillow, exhaustion weighing heavy. But he couldn't sleep. Something told him to check the tablet he and Rachel occasionally shared. And there it was. Her email was still open. She'd forgotten to log out. His heart pounded as he scrolled through her inbox, not knowing what he was searching for, until he found it. An email from Rachel to Emily. Subject: Final Steps. He opened it, and what he read made his blood boil. A full breakdown. A timeline for destroying him. Wait until Matthew pays next semester's tuition. File for divorce immediately after. Claim irreconcilable differences and a drinking problem. Petition the court to freeze assets for her protection. Push for a quick settlement while he's still confused from the accident. Move in with Nelson once everything's finalized. They even listed what furniture they'd take. It was all there. Cold, calculated, heartless. Matthew sat frozen, the tablet glowing in his lap, realizing just how far they were willing to go. They weren't hoping to be free of him. They were planning to erase him and walk away with everything he'd ever worked for. As the night wore on, Matthew sat surrounded by documents, screenshots, and emotional shrapnel. His injured arm throbbed, but it couldn't compare to the pain building in his chest. Every new file he opened hit like a punch to the gut. The financial part was staggering. He'd uncovered nearly $200,000 spread across multiple hidden bank accounts, money that should have gone toward their future, retirement, Emily's education, emergency savings, all funneled away behind his back. But the emotional betrayal? That was worse. In Rachel's emails, he found hundreds of messages with a man named Nelson, her boss. Nothing too explicit, but the tone said it all. "You understand me. I can't wait to start fresh. He's never going to change." They shared fantasies of a new life, one that didn't include Matthew. Then came the messages between Rachel and Emily. Cold, transactional, like corporate scheming over his life. "Wait until tuition clears. Play nice until we have what we need. Dad won't fight over the house if we push him right." Emily, his daughter, the little girl who used to fall asleep on his chest, was in on it from the beginning. She wasn't just aware, she was helping her mom strategize how to drain him dry before kicking him to the curb. They'd even taken photos of planted liquor bottles around the house, empty, placed like props, building the illusion of Matthew as a secret alcoholic. All part of the narrative they were crafting. A husband lost to the bottle, unstable and unfit, unworthy of trust or sympathy. Sitting there in the dim light, Matthew realized the truth. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a full-scale takedown, planned by the two people he loved the most, and they had no idea he was about to turn the tables. Matthew knew it was all about timing now. Every day he played the part of the wounded, clueless husband, quiet, slow-moving, on pain meds, asking simple questions and smiling when they answered with lies. But behind that calm, he was building a fortress of truth. The hidden cameras were working perfectly. He positioned them just right. In the living room, the kitchen, even Rachel's office, everything recorded directly to his phone. Every whisper, every scheme. The recordings were damning. When Rachel thought he was at physical therapy, she brought Nelson over. They sat on Matthew's couch, sipped Matthew's whiskey, and talked freely about the new life they'd have once the divorce was done. No shame, no remorse. just plans to erase the man who had given them everything. But Matthew didn't flinch. He didn't storm in. He followed his lawyer's advice. Document everything. He kept printing transcripts, logging financial activity, saving backups of every email, every message between Rachel and Emily, photos of planted bottles, fake receipts, forged behavior patterns. They were all part of the story Rachel and Emily were weaving for the court. But now, he held the real narrative. In private, he updated legal documents, transferred assets, locked down everything he could. His lawyer, a woman nicknamed the Piranha, assured him they were building an airtight case, one the court couldn't ignore. And finally, one night, as Matthew sat reviewing footage of Rachel laughing with Nelson on the patio, something clicked. Not just anger or grief. Those had come and gone. What settled in now was clarity. He was done. Done pretending, done hurting, done carrying a family that had been sharpening knives behind his back for years.